Welcome, friends. Actually, Kingmakers IAS Academy has taken a great initiative for training the aspirants in various ways, particularly for the personality test for the last 2 to 3 years, with the help of a great eminent personality is like Sir. And last week we had a session with DP Agarwal Sir, and coming week we are also going to have a session with the help of senior most bureaucrats like Mr. Sri Rudra Gangadharan sir and Sri Balachandran IAS sir. There are many senior most bureaucrats. They are going to help you. And today we have the great resource persons who was trained and who was mentored thousands of aspirants, those who have successfully cleared the civil service examination. And here you are going to listen, you're going to gain a lot of inputs so that your score is going to really go up. The personal test, the myths and the reality, both you are going to learn today. So I'm very happy today the sir has agreed for such a wonderful session. Thank you so much, sir. On behalf of the Kingmakers IAS Academy and India Boy, we welcome you, sir.
So very good afternoon to one and all. So we have a great, honorable, eminent personality here. He is Sri Baswan IAS, who have joined in IAS in 1967 as an officer of Madhya Pradesh cadre. He had marked his footprints in various roles in different institutions he was serving. He was the director in the Indian Institute of Public Administration and then was a secretary in Department of Secondary and Higher Education in Ministry of Human Resources Development, Government of India, and also served as a director in Lal Bahadur Shastri, National Academy of Administration, Missouri. I'm very honored to welcome him here for the topic Public Policy Drivers in India. Welcome, sir, and over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. At the outset, let me tell you that this is not purely a guide for the interview. As far as the interview is concerned, all I can say is that have confidence in yourself and a certain amount of empathy for the interviewers. Body language is important, but remember that interviewers can catch you off guard sometimes. So you have to be mentally alert, pleasant, relaxed, maintain eye-to-eye contact, think carefully, because many of us tend to answer without considering the question carefully enough. This is probably a trait most of us Indians, we tend to be voluble and opinionated. So that's another thing. Don't be definite about your opinions. You can put forward a view and just say that this is what I believe in, maybe for these reasons. And you have to stay calm and again, understand that the interviewing board members are basically sympathetic. They want to draw you out. They want to understand you. And in order for you to do well, you must try and understand them. They're ordinary individuals like all of us. Don't be overawed by them. If they were great people in this world, they must have died long ago. Because all of us are basically, in our own ways, ordinary people. We have our strengths and our weaknesses. So it's just a question of being yourself. Obviously, don't try and pretend to be what you aren't. And proceed calmly, as confidently as you can. Now, this session on public policy drivers is actually covers a very wide range of subjects. A lot of general knowledge is involved. Some may involve your interview. They might raise some issues. So what I plan to do in this session is to give a very broad overview of what drives public policy. It's concerned with governance and going back over 100 years, the main events, and then I'll come to in some detail the present, the events of the 21st century, the major earth-shaking events, and we take it from there. A lot will be discussion-oriented. I can answer any question, whatever you ask. Since it's a general subject, you can ask any question you like on any of these subjects. I'll do my best to answer them to the best of my ability. And no holds barred, literally. It's a 2-hour session. We can break for 5 minutes in between. Listening to a lecture is a little more difficult than giving one. So I need to keep that in mind. And if the organizers agree, I can start. If it's okay by Professor Bhuminathan and his colleagues.
Yes, sir.
Okay, right. Shall I go ahead?
Yes, sir. Sure, sir.
Okay, sure. Right. Now, let me take you back a little over 100 years, and let's see what the main events of the 20th century were. This is at the end of World War I. The war was, of course, won by the powers, the British, the French, the Americans. The Russians opted out of the war because the Russian Revolution. And the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk in 1918 basically meant for the Russians peace at all costs. So the Russian Revolution obviously changed that country. And the Treaty of Versailles at the end of 1918, followed by other treaties, Trianon and much later Sevres, it led to just 2 or 3 things which have a bearing on our lives, on the world even today. The Treaty of Versailles meant that land was actually given to France, which the Germans had claimed. And this was one of the seeds of the Second World War. Alsace and Lorraine were transferred to France. And in a sense, this was a time bomb. The Treaty of Versailles imposed heavy reparations on the Germans, particularly. The Austro-Hungarian Empire was broken up, so we had a lot of countries, or East European countries, a large number of them were born or reborn after World War I. 2 bureaucrats, an Englishman and a Frenchman, took a pencil and paper, and even before the war, they planned the future of the Middle East. Basically, these 2 imperial powers divided the Ottoman Empire among themselves, leaving Turkey intact. So this meant that a lot of countries were created, and these 2 countries wanted their influence to remain. The matter became a little more important with the discovery of oil. And therefore, the British cultivated their ally in World War I, Abdulaziz ibn Saud, who later, of course, was the king of Saudi Arabia. And every single Saudi Arabian king after him has been his son, as he had probably a large number of sons. He had a number of wives, and he was quite prolific in what he did. Now, the thing was that in public policy is actually is driven by 3 things. We don't live in a perfect world. One is ideology. If you have an ideology, you'd like to support it, but an ideology, whether religious, whether political, whether economic, whether ecological, gives you a framework, but at times it prevents you from thinking. It becomes a substitute for thinking. And if you believe in something blindly and you follow the principle of what people call a willing suspension of disbelief, then you lose your rationality as a person. So, but political parties and others are governed by ideology, and these ideologies very often are not in the interest of the nation, are not in the interest of individuals. Another factor is rent-seeking, or what we call corruption. Now, corruption is as old as the hills. It's been there for a long time. Cordelia himself talks about it. It's a factor, and by corruption, I also include attempts by politicians of getting themselves re-elected. And when they try and do that, they basically tend to harm the nation in certain ways because of their individual agendas. This is something which we all have to live with and understand. We don't have to sympathize with it completely, but it helps to understand it. The third ideology, basically, again linked with votes, is we do something to please people, populism. The Americans call it pork barrel politics. We in India call it vote bank politics. Now, these tend to be distortions, and yet we know that our democratic system is what we have committed to. In 2007, the king of Bhutan announced that he wanted democracy in his country. It was a very closed kingdom. The people said, "Your Majesty, things are very good. Why do you want democracy?" He said, "Because they are good, I want democracy, and I'm going to abdicate. My son will implement the transition." The king abdicated, the son came, and the old king then spoke to Dr. Manmohan Singh and asked him to send the election commission. The election commission people came, they organized a meeting of the leading citizens, and they said, form political parties. You form one party and you form the other. He said, but he's my friend, why should I oppose them? He said, no, you form parties. They created parties. Then they sent for another team to explain governance and also democracy, led by a very senior foreign service officer. I was a part of that team, and my job was to explain the civil service role and democracy. When I went into the classroom, a bigger classroom as big a classroom as yours, I would say, with a large number of senior Bhutan civil servants, all of whom had got their degrees in India, and the majority had got postgraduate degrees in the US. And when I entered the room, they said, are you trying to sell us your corrupt and dysfunctional brand of democracy? So I said, as a matter of fact, yes. Try and look at matters in perspective. Britain was totally corrupt when it became a democracy around the year 1715, because the King of England couldn't speak a word of English. So the Prime Minister managed to manipulate things. He created fake constituencies. He appointed his friends and relatives in Parliament. And then he made as much money as he could, although he was an able administrator. In the US, post used to be auctioned by governors as late as the 1820s. So corruption, in a sense, is a part of an evolutionary process. So I told the audience that it took the British 300 years. It took the Americans 200 years to become mature democracies. We are not yet a mature democracy, but we might be one in 100 years. I wouldn't live to see the day, but most of you will. So why are you people complaining in Bhutan? It'll take you only 50 years and you have less social and cultural baggage than we have. So democracy is a delicate plant. There are factors which erode democracy, but the fact is that this has come to stay as a way of life. And I believe that a diverse and a strong country like India's will remain democratic in spite of dire predictions to the contrary. Coming back to the events of the last 100 years, remember the three drivers: ideology, rent-seeking, and populism. Well, after World War I, the next major event was, of course, we had the Spanish flu, we had German hyperinflation, but it was the collapse of Wall Street in 1929. Now, overnight, what happened was that markets collapsed. In this case, as all of us know, those who studied economics will know very well that when investment and consumption dry up, government expenditure becomes critical. And you need Keynesian interventions for that. Sarkari culture, as they say in the North. Now, the fact is that it was Keynes's followers and others who advocated government expenditure. And across the Atlantic in the US, President F.D. Roosevelt went in for his spending, as it were, what he called the New Deal. And that helped the US. But what really ended the Great Depression was World War II. In economic terms, world wars can be a wonderful cure because it takes care of unemployment. It increases production. There are distortions. But the fact is that World War II effectively ended the Great Depression. After the war, the victors won because of industrial depth. Stalin was planning for war as early as 1927. And it was the resources of the United States of America, the Soviet Union, and the British Commonwealth and Empire, the British dominions and empire, which actually won the war. Of course, Britain was exhausted after the war, as was most of Europe. The US had developed a very strong economy by then. And this time, the victors, the Allies, decided not to punish the losers, but work with them. And this helped restore the world's economy. Japan was supported by the United States, and they did well. The rest is history. They are now the world's third largest economy. Germany recovered well, and Italy itself has grown, even though they have had their political and other hiccups, but they've done fairly well. So that way the world is a better place. But after World War II, the next event was the two events. One was the Cold War. Soon after that ended, it became virtually armed confrontation between East and West. The second factor was the end of colonialism. When in India's independence, again, when you look at it, we had a vibrant freedom movement. But the fact was that it was unviable for the British to hold on to India. They were totally exhausted. It was a matter of time. And even though a lot of great sacrifices were made by our leaders, it came to us at the end fairly easily. And of course, Mahatma Gandhi was intelligent enough to understand how to deal with the British colonialists. He did that. And we became an independent country in 1947 and later a republic in 1950. Nehru deserves a lot of credit for giving us very sound democratic base. And his democratic credentials had helped the plant of democracy survive, grow in the climate of India, which was at that time probably not so favorable for the growth of this plant. So democracy in this country has come to stay, and attempts have been made to erode democracy. They were made often wherever the central government is powerful. Indira Gandhi made serious attempts. The present government is also under fire for being impatient with democracy and democratic institutions. These are trends. These are trends which are there, will manifest themselves. But I wouldn't share the pessimism of some who say that this is the last free election we'll have. I don't believe that at all. I believe there's sufficient countervailing forces in this country. This is a very diverse country. For those of you in Tamil Nadu, you probably remember that Mr. Ramaswamy Naikar, aka Periyar, used to organize Ravan Leelas in the 1930s, where the effigies of Ram, Lakshman, and Hanuman were burnt. So what happens is that this is a diverse country where different opinions and different beliefs will exist and will need to be tolerated. You cannot be exclusivist, you cannot persecute minorities, you can't stand by when minorities are being persecuted. This is something which a mature democracy has to realize. Karnataka is the latest example, but I'm optimistic enough. I believe that the ruling coalition are aware of some of these factors, and the mismanagement in Karnataka would, I think, be dealt with by the party itself and by the government of India. These distortions do come, but overall the trend, I believe, is very, very positive. And I wouldn't be unduly alarmed about this, although one does not agree with such policies whatsoever. And attempts at eroding democracy, this is not there. But this government has done well in a lot of other areas. The political debate has been vitiated by rhetoric and ideology, but rather than get involved in these fruitless debates, we have to look at the good points and the bad points. And there are many good points about this government that we should note as well. A lot of reforms, initiatives involving direct transfers to individuals, things like Swachh Bharat, a lot of and things which have helped improve the level delivery systems and involvement of more and more people in the democratic framework. Local government has not grown because no one likes to share power. Dr. Ambedkar was hesitant to support local government because the local panchayats were generally caste-driven, and therefore it was not included in the main body of the constitution, but in the directive principles. A strong center does not like strong states. States do not like Zilla Panchayats. Zilla Panchayats don't like Block Panchayats. Block Panchayats don't like Gram Panchayats. Everyone talks about delegation, but no one is willing to do it below their own level. This happens. And therefore, the 73rd and 74th Amendments to the Constitution have largely remained dead letters because the Chief Minister depends on his MLAs, and the MLAs have filled a political void. So They have power. Very often they have patronage. Some of them interfere in the administration and make money. So they will not willingly part with power. So any attempt at creating a strong Panchayati Raj will be crushed. Kerala is an honorable exception. But otherwise, in states like Gujarat, Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra, and Karnataka, you had chief ministers who supported Panchayati Raj, but their reforms were undone by their successors because they wanted to keep the MLAs happy. Similarly, municipalities are not fully trusted by state governments. This is normally a part of the power game, and therefore a lot of institutions, they are sources of revenue. They do quite well. The biggest, of course, is Brihad Mumbai or Bombay, but even that institute has become organizations become a kind of football between leading political players. Good work has been done, certainly, in this regard. But now coming to the other events in the last 100 years, end of colonialism, the Cold War, and the Cold War ended. Why did the Soviet Union lose the Cold War? The reasons are largely economic. They could not keep up. There were structural inefficiencies in government, because in World War II, the Soviet Union did very well because in a crisis, the command economy works well. All the linkages are complete, right from, say, coal to steel to power to transportation, and people work very hard in wartime. The same people do nothing in peacetime. So what happened was that the war was won on the Eastern Front by the Soviet Union. And this reinforced the belief that socialism would be the answer for two reasons. One was the Great Depression was certainly checked by socialism. And the other thing was that the Soviet Union became a model. So when Prime Minister Nehru went to the Soviet Union, and I think it was 1954, he was very impressed. And when he came back, 54, 55, he said, we must follow more. He became more of a socialist. He was by inclination a socialist because in the Great Depression, every thinking person had to be a socialist. That was the convention, because people could see that that was one way of escaping from the effects of the Great Depression. As a child growing up in post-war Britain, I realized that I would get one bottle of yogurt, dahi, or curd as they call it, and one bottle of, one egg a week, because there was rationing. So I didn't like rationing. I objected. I was all of 6 when rationing was at its peak. And then my landlord said that, don't worry, Mr. Churchill will come back. You'll get your egg and you'll get your yogurt. So Mr. Churchill came back and I got my egg and I got my yogurt. I gave up socialism. Now, socialism is probably the most noble ideology invented by my man. It takes into account everything except human nature. And therefore, it doesn't always work in the real world unless it's buttressed by a brutal dictatorship, whether of Stalin or whether of Mao, or whether of the Kims of Korea. But otherwise, it doesn't work because it goes against the very grain of people. It's an ideal system. And yet the best thinkers in the world, in this country as well, the best intellectuals, the best people are very often socialists. So socialism may have not worked in the way that Marx and Engels thought it would, but it remains relevant. And any policy has to take into account socialist factors as well as capitalist factors, as well as monetarism, because governments can win battles against the market, but the market always wins the war. And therefore, obviously, there has to be production, productivity, and that can best happen, we broadly believe, in either in free markets or, like China has, a kind of dictatorial capitalism, which basically, guided by the party, is what China is. And the Chinese miracle did work because Deng Xiaoping in 1979 abolished socialism on the land. A farmer was required to give 90% of his produce to the commune. The reforms changed that. He began giving 10%, roughly these figures. So what happened was Chinese agriculture production doubled in 5 years. The agriculture revolution there led to the industrial revolution, and China has been the fastest growing country for a number of years. And they took a decision. They said that we will not follow Gorbachev, we will not follow the Soviet Union, because they believe the Russians made the mistake of economic liberalization accompanied by political freedom, democracy. And they decided to crush democracy, which they did in Tiananmen Square. And that virtually crushed the attempt at people trying to, decide for themselves. A lot of students were massacred in 1989. So since then, China has been basically a capitalist dictator, the dictatorship of the party, not the proletariat. Now, again, coming back to the developments after that, we've had the gradual end of the Cold War. That changed things a bit. We followed a non-aligned system. We had 3 wars with China, and there are 2 points about who was right and who was wrong. It's a historical issue. One can discuss that maybe in the question hour. But that basically, by the end of the 20th century, the world had broadly stabilized. Countries were growing. Global economic growth had certainly taken root. In the case of India, we had to follow the socialist pattern of society initially. But then, over the years, we realized that too much of government can lead to a lot of distortions. I'd worked in the Ministry of Industry during the license permit Raj. And apart from some money being made at the technical level, the ministry by and large wasn't involved. But the money was because you were punished for producing more. If you produced more, action would be taken against you. The greatest Indian socialist in those days was not Mr. M.N. Roy, but Mr. Ghanshyam Das Birla. Because all these companies, they got cheap raw materials using money or political power at a very low cost. And except for Hindustan Motors and Simco in Bharatpur, and there they had captive markets courtesy the government. So the competition was prevented. People would say in the ministry that sufficient capacity exists, we don't need more industries. So these policies were extremely harmful for the country. But the good thing is that bankrupt policies lead to bankrupt governments. And bankruptcy was the best thing that happened to India when the 1991 reforms took place. Because no one wanted reforms. The politicians didn't, the bureaucrats didn't, the businessmen didn't. They were very happy selling substandard goods to a captive audience at high prices. The victim was the Indian consumer who didn't really have a voice. The trade unions, the academia, and the judiciary, steeped in a socialist rhetoric, which was the prevailing wisdom at the time, didn't favor these reforms, and yet it happened. And when it happened, production and productivity improved, our growth rates improved, and we put behind us the old, much derided Hindu rate of growth. So we had growth towards the end of the 20th century. Coming to the 21st century, our present century, there are certain major game changers, major events. The first was 9/11. When the second Boeing aircraft crashed into the Twin Towers, I was watching it. My father was with me, a World War II veteran. And I said that the world has changed beyond, beyond imagination. Things will never be the same again. It may not be really bad for India politically. 9/11 also led to serious distortions. It led to a lot of Islamophobia, for which, to some extent, the Americans are responsible, because when the Soviet Union was invaded by Afghanistan, the Americans waged a successful proxy war against them and got them out. But they also encouraged Islamic militants to come in. As I've been to Afghanistan twice virtually in times of war, I've seen what a beautiful country and affectionate people they have. But the fact was that it's been extremely sad. And the country has, of course, suffered a great deal more than any other country. They were at war when I went in 1990, and in 2000, they were still at war. But the time has now come to engage with the Taliban and work with them. They are the elected government. They are not the elected government, they're the selected government, but the fact is that they are there to stay. And they are keen to represent their best face to the world and try and improve their country, no matter what their beliefs are. So you cannot ignore them. You will have to support them, and food aid was a good step. We need to do more in this direction. After 9/11, because the other example I want to give you, in fact, was that of the Iraq War. Saddam Hussein was a brutal dictator, it's true. He was a first-rate administrator, which is also true. He helped that country grow rapidly. He was not a fundamentalist. Al-Qaeda would not have been allowed to grow and thrive in his country, not at all. But it was the lobbies. The United States arms lobby, oil lobby, supply lobby, construction lobbies, all of them virtually pushed the Gulf into World War, pushed the US into the Gulf War II. So what happened then was that the interest groups generally captured, in my generation, it was the Vietnam War. And in the Vietnam War, it was the military-industrial complex. And this war did not end in Konpun City. It ended on the fields of Kent State University, Ohio, when I think 8 or 9 students were shot dead by the National Guard, because the Americans realized that their government were not acting in their own interest. And very often governments don't act in the interests of the people at large, because who's to say what represents the people? But they say we are the best to judge. And that's how things develop. So the second great event of the 21st century, and your century as all of you are millennials, would be the great, the financial crisis of 2008, the collapse of Lehman Brothers, of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, the way it reverberated around the world. And this was again because of some of the common reasons, the Great Depression. But this time the world was wiser. They understood. And different countries adopted different measures to check this and prevent things from getting out of control. To control this, they used instruments from different ideologies. They used Keynesian interventions, in some cases Marxist interventions like improved land reforms, monetarist interventions, but they were able to bring the situation under a degree of control. The world had a lot of wiser people then. India was lucky. We escaped the worst effects of this crisis because our banks were well capitalized. We were shielded as we had a somewhat inward-looking economic policy, and we had a huge home market. Another factor was black money. Now, black money has huge disadvantages, but this was a great advantage for us in dealing with the financial crisis. Consumption was not disturbed. There was money in the market. It kept us going for some time. So there's a degree of moral ambiguity, as it were. In the last century, of course, the 1991 reforms put an end to the license permit raj, and after that, the country grew. Barriers to entry were removed. There was competition. We moved towards capital account convertibility. Insurance and banking was slowly liberalized. And therefore, it did make for economic growth. It has now. Trade was also liberalized. And that, I believe, has greatly benefited our economy. And bankruptcy was the cause of reform, because we have a saying in Madhya Pradesh that after bankruptcy comes wisdom. So the 21st century, we've had two great events. The third event was obviously COVID-19. Now, COVID-19 hasn't gone away. It come in different shapes. It's affected our lives, the lives of the whole world. I've been a COVID patient. My wife and daughter were badly affected, but luckily we came through. And right at the moment, we have another COVID case in the house. I was tested negative, but my wife may have got Omicron. That's tested, it's positive. It's something which will be there. It will gradually dissipate. It probably would become mild no matter what the XE variant is like. But these are things which come unexpectedly, and economies have to be resilient. We made our mistakes initially. It was, in fact, the heavy clampdown meant that the unorganized labor in particular had to literally walk all the way home. And that was an aberration. Since then, governments have, state and the central government have learned their lessons. The rollout of vaccines is quite an achievement, and we have done fairly well. Of course, the debate currently on is how many people died. And the WHO and a lot of media houses say that the number was 4 million. It might be closer to that number. We don't know. But the fact is that our database is extremely weak. In the Spanish flu, for example, we have anecdotal evidence of bodies floating down the Ganges even then. And therefore, people did die, and deaths were not recorded by the colonial government too. So this was, again, something that governments have to face. And some of them did their best, but the fact was that at that time, things had gotten out of control.
Yes,
sorry.
Yes, sir. Sir, students are also asking certain doubts, sir. So
Yes,
after your lecture, we'll be able to post all the doubts to you, sir.
Sorry? Yeah.
Sir, the question answer part, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, in this COVID-19 that you said, sir, what are the challenges to public policy, sir?
Well, the first challenge to public policy is investment in health. And now health, education, and welfare have been neglected by all governments. The reason is that the social sector is a sector which is not really a vote-gathering sector for members of parliament and MLAs. As a secretary of 3 social sector ministries, I used to lobby my members of parliament. And a few of them came to me and they said, look, we sympathize with you, but we can't support you. So I said, why not? They said that our time frame is 5 years. We have to be re-elected. What we support are electricity, roads, water, housing, clothing, things that affect our daily lives. Long gestation, low visibility investments like health, education, welfare, they don't really get us votes. And this was a fact that there was no demand. What COVID has done is it has forced the government to step up its health investment, which is necessary for a country. Education too is gradually, and credit must be given to both national coalitions, NDA and UPA, for Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan, the midday meal, Tamil Nadu pioneers in that. These have been game changers, and this has helped a lot. The present government's, in fact, supplying a lot of these are pretty effective schemes like providing free rations, LPG connections, Swachh Bharat, these and direct delivery systems. These have helped the country quite a bit. And therefore, the governments are coping with them as best as they can, both the central and the state governments.
Thank you, sir. Sir, before you continue with certain part of your lecture, sir, so one few questions on the things that you introduced to us. How to empower local governments, sir? So there is a conflict of politics. Apart from that, how?
Yeah, you see, the thing is that if I'm an MLA, I'm a powerful person because the chief minister will listen to me, officers will listen to me. I go to the collector's office, the collector is supposed to stand up and talk to me. And By and large, this has been the pattern because I am important, because I am an elected person, and the chief minister also depends on my vote. Now, if a Zilla Parishad were to come, I would lose a lot of my power. If I am corrupt, I'll take money for transfers. And I will interfere, and I'll take my cut if there's some contracts to be had. So I am interested in carrying on. And if I will not allow a powerful Zira Parishad to come. And my colleagues think like I do, so we will tell the chief minister, we don't really need Panchayati Raj in this country because we will take care of everything. Chief ministers will be happy because they don't want powerful Zilla Parishad people telling him what to do. He'll issue the orders to the collectors and the work would be done. So there is a strong interest group in favor of the status quo. Because it's in the directive principles of state policy, no one is going to take it seriously. And similarly, powerful municipal bodies are not liked by state governments. If your Chennai corporation is very powerful, it may be a threat perception on the part of the state government. Let us take a state like Delhi. The government, both the BJP and the Congress, because of competitive populism, they helped create a government in Delhi. And the government in Delhi, even if it was the same party as the central government, they've always fought with the central government. Because no government in this world will allow a powerful local government at its headquarters to come up. London and Paris have traditionally had the most powerful mayors. But even they have been put in their place by the other governments. In Washington, D.C., 2 mayors have been led away in handcuffs. So what happens is that no government, you cannot have a powerful local government in your national capital. Conflict is going to be inevitable, regardless of their political affiliation.
Sir, and you said about non-alignment, sir, when you were talking about
okay,
it.
yeah, sure.
How it is relevant even now, sir?
You see, non-alignment would have been necessary at that time. It was probably inevitable because Pakistan was a member of CENTO and there was American pressure. The Jammu and Kashmir imbroglio, as it were, had continued for a while. And rather than go into the pros and cons of that, the fact is that that remained an unresolved issue of partition. And because of the Soviet Union's veto, India had to rely on the Soviet Union, and it swung. And then the leftist policies of the earlier governments also didn't push us into the arms of the Soviet Union, but they gathered like-minded leaders like President Nasser of Egypt, President Tito of Yugoslavia, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana, Sekou Toure of Guinea. So all these leaders came under a broad umbrella, and they wanted to tread the middle path between the two great powers. So it was very relevant. Now it's more of a nuanced system. We've had to walk a tightrope right now coming to Ukraine, and that would be the third event of the 21st century, and I'll cover that briefly, that this may be Putin's war. Now, it is hegemony because if you look back in every battle, every war, there are always two sides to it. The Soviet, if you take Russia, for example, the first kingdom of Russia was basically in the 9th century, Ruriks. After that, the Rus kingdom of Kiev. It was the center of Russian culture under Prince Vladimir. And his family, of course, later moved to Moscow. Ivan the Terrible was the first Tsar of Russia. But there is a historical connection between Ukraine and Russia. Obviously, when the Cold War ended, the Eastern European countries, based on their threat perception, moved a little away from the Soviet Union. The 3 Baltic countries, Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia, they became NATO members. So did Poland. So all these countries, they hedged their bets and they said that we'd rather go in for a NATO membership. Byelorussian, of course, the Russians had maintained their indirect control, and now they have their man over there. And Lukashenko has, the present person has been working for them for all practical purposes. He is their satellite. Now, the thing is that Ukraine, they were worried about Ukraine. They've never reconciled themselves to Ukrainian independence. And Sebastopol was always the headquarters of the Russian fleet. So they seized Sebastopol. Earlier, they made inroads into the Russian majority areas of Luhansk and Donetsk. And much like they did in Georgia with Abkhazia and the Panjshir Gorge. So this expansionism has been going on for a while. And they were a little worried, so he took the plunge and did this because he did not want the West in his own backyard, as he thought. Of course, that doesn't condone his war. But the fact is that the longer that the war goes on, the worse it is for him. But we are walking a tightrope. I can't blame our policymakers on this because we are dependent on Russia. Our armament industry is interwoven with theirs, even though we've not been getting our spares like we have in the past. There will be gradual disengagement, but this will take time. And therefore, the present government says that we should go in for Atmanirbharta, as they call it. And they do want to develop certain facilities and so that we can be less dependent now.
One last question, and next we'll have another faculty, Adil, to ask questions, sir.
Sure.
One last question is that, sir, we have a problem in China with the Hong Kong, China versus Hong Kong and Tibet.
Yeah, sure.
And also we also have our own domestic trouble with Gorkhaland, Bodoland, and also.
Okay, let's come to Hong Kong and Tibet first. Now, what happened was that if you look at Chinese history, the early dynasties, starting with the Rhea dynasty, that was semi-mythical early Bronze Age. You had the Shang dynasty in the Bronze Age, when you got these, where culture was developed. You had of course, the first emperor, the Qin dynasty, Qin Shi Huang, who passed away in 221 BCE. By then, he united the country. Now, whenever the Chinese emperor was strong or the empire was strong, whether it was in the time of the imperial Hans, especially Emperor Wu Di, whether it was in the time of the Tang Empire, Daizu, they controlled a large part of China right up to the Tarim Basin. Today, what is Kashgar, Yarkand, all these areas, they had virtually exercised their control. And when they were really powerful, they would extend their things right up to places like Bukhara. So what happened was that whenever the Chinese empire was strong, these were all vassal countries. This includes Tibet as well. And of course, Hong Kong was very much a part of China. And so it's off and on, they had possession of these areas. In the India-China border dispute, things are not as simple as put forward by us as well. Because in international law as well as in national laws, continuous and peaceful possession has been a fact that this determines your boundaries. And at times, the Karakoram actually has never been, we have not extended our empire beyond the Karakoram. In fact, there's been a dividing line. And legally, the Chinese may have a better claim because in the time of the imperial Tangs and the Han, and even later in the time of the Kangxi Emperor and the Qin or Manchu dynasties, they had access over there. So there are two sides to this. The British, after their agreement with Dost Muhammad and creating the Durand Line in the 19th century, they obviously wanted to create a second buffer state in Tibet. And at that time, Tibet was very weak. The Chinese empire was virtually at its end around 1911. And the Kuomintang, Sun Yat-sen's party, had not yet seized power. So that was the time when China was in limbo. And this is part of Lord Curzon's colonial vision. He got Francis Young's husband to invade Tibet. We captured most of Tibet. And then we invited the Tibetans to sign a treaty. The fact was that we also invited the Chinese emperor's representatives as well as the representative of the Kuomintang. Both declined to join, but said we do not recognize your agreement. So the Treaty of Simla was probably an imposition. After we became independent, the Chinese and Zhou Enlai raised this issue with Prime Minister Nehru. But we said that we are the successors in the interest of the British Empire, and therefore we are not going to change the status quo. So that actually was at the root of all of this. It's a long story about how the CIA with the aircraft based in Peshawar sent us photographs of Chinese road building in Aksai. And the 62 war was in a sense a blunder on our part, because we should have in fact talked, because when they came in, we allowed them to come in, we should have talked to them and not refused to talk to them. So there are obviously two sides to this. But the fact was that the defeat of 1962 enabled the defense sector to prepare itself for the two Indo-Pak wars. This is as far as
please unmute
Sir,
yourself.
thank you.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I'm back now. Is it? Am I audible, by the way?
Yes, sir, you're audible.
Yes. Go ahead then. Huh? Right. Is this who's this? Alpha? Is it or?
Sir,
Yeah.
Adil
Sir,
Beg.
this is
Adil.
Adil Beg,
Yeah,
faculty
okay.
of Kingmakers IAS Academy.
Okay. Yeah, sure. Go ahead, Adil. Yeah.
I teach economy and international relations, sir. Sir,
Okay.
the question is regarding the engagement with Taliban, which you touched upon, sir.
Yeah.
At this point of time, how we can take forward regarding this engagement and how to balance this Taliban's relations with respect to this newly created axis, China-Pakistan Taliban axis?
Sure. We need to engage with the Taliban. This is extremely important, because last time when I went to Afghanistan, of course, by then, the Taliban were more or less pushing towards the capital. It was very different from 1990. Now, the thing here is that the Taliban are very much there, and they are themselves walking a tightrope. They have a lot of problems. They first have to restore their economy. They have to control their own hotheads. Now, when Prime Minister Imran Khan sent General Faiz across to Kabul, and then he said that now we'll, Mohammed Baradar was not given the due power, and he was a key figure at the Qatar discussions. So the fact was that we thought that the hardliners had taken control of the Taliban, so we acted rather defensively. But then we realized that there are balancing forces. There is a power struggle right now, which will continue, but they will have to arrive at a new equilibrium. If the Taliban are to survive, they will act as a kind of, they will work towards stability and respectability, which is their aim. They would like to restore the economy. They would like to carry as many people with them. They've given their representation to the Tajiks, who were their most powerful enemies, the Uzbeks, the Shias of Herat, and Ismail Khan also. He was in fact captured and released, who is close to the Shias, and even the Hazaras, who have very sadly coopted from everyone because of their ethnic differences, and the fact that, apart from the fact that they've been Shias, they have had a tough time because of their Mongol origin. In fact, when we talk about Mongols, a lot of us are also Mongols as well, because we tend to forget that the Mongols controlled India right along the Satluj, so did the Huns. So if you take a gene map of any Indian, you will find that apart from being all out of Africa, which we are, we have no Mongoloid genes, we have Caucasoid genes, we might even have Australoid genes because island hopping had taken place. And as far as the Americas are concerned, because of the last ice age when people moved from Northeast Asia. They were cut off when the last ice age ended around 20,000 BC. They were isolated in the Americas. And that's why when the European colonialists went to the Americas, literally millions of Native Americans were killed, not by the white man's bullets, but by his diseases. So there are a lot of other issues involved here. But ethnically, we really don't know who we are. And if you go in for gene mapping of Indians, you'll find it's a crazy mix. So, you know, it's a problem that, and India, I believe, is in many ways a racist country, but that's something which we have to live with. Sorry, Adil, are you around or what's happening here?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I am here, sir. Thank you, sir. Yeah, sir. Yes, sir. So the next question is regarding the United Nations security. Sir, your audio is muted.
Yeah, it keeps happening. I'll just unmute it right away.
No, he's unmuted only.
Yeah, sorry, it's unmuted now. Is it okay?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Yeah, now it's audible.
Okay, carry on. Sorry,
yeah, sir. The question is,
yeah.
Sir. The question is, and the next question is regarding the role of India in Security Council. So we are just having a short.
Well, you see, the League of Nations failed completely because they had no powerful stakeholders. So after World War II, how the UN differs from the League of Nations is the Security Council. And more important than that, the permanent members. The victors of the Second World War became the permanent members. To the victor, the spoils. So therefore, they had the power to adjust the, is the camera okay? Or is this okay? Is this okay? It's too close, Madhavi.
Yes, sir. Perfect.
Yeah, okay, sorry, yeah. So the thing is that here, the Security Council members, permanent members control the United Nations to a large extent. Of course, there are two types of control. One is the veto control and the other is the financial control. Financial control is where the US flexes its muscles because they've been the biggest contributor, although Donald Trump put an end to that. And now, you know, it's more diverse. But the fact is that you have a veto that these are the big boys, they're going to run the show, and there's very little we can do about it. India, in particular, has been very vocal about expanding the Security Council. The Germans, Japanese would like to be there, but they are following us. And the fact is that no one will let you in. It's like getting into a second-class compartment. You fight your way in, the people inside will not let you into the compartment. And if you manage to get in, then you start behaving like the other people do. But no one will let you enter that compartment. The security, we talk about permanent membership. Let's be realistic, no one is going to give us permanent membership.
Then how to take forward this issue of vetoes, sir? This veto power has made this UN dysfunctional organization. So how we can make it functional?
It's dysfunctional for us. For the Security Council permanent members, it's not dysfunctional at all. It suits them. You see, because power, people would like to perpetuate power, and they'll be dragged away, kicking and screaming from that situation. They're not going to give up easily. I mean, they're all, you know, literally they are brothers under the skin in one way.
True, sir. True, sir. So the next question is the question is regarding the India's public policy making. At one side, because of the national security purposes, there is a requirement for the government to take the data of the citizens and with respect to that privacy concern. There is a privacy concern at one side, and national security needs the surveillance also. So, as a public policy maker, where we have to draw a line and how we have to balance this surveillance and national security.
It's a very delicate line. What I'll do is, I talked about a 5-minute. Just let's have a break for about 2 or 3 minutes.
Yes, sir. Yes, after the,
okay.
Yes, we'll have some.
Sure,
I'll join you in about 3 or 4 minutes.
Yeah. Sure, sir.
Sure.
I'm back now. Am I audible?
Yes, sir. Perfectly.
Okay.
Yes, sir. You're audible.
Let's come back to your question, Adil. I'll just respond to that. Yeah. The question was basically About the Security Council. I'll come to your Hong Kong question as well, but let's answer your immediate question. Yeah, about reforming the UN was when we left it, is it? Or you had mentioned another thing. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. About the reform of UN and about the national security and privacy.
Sorry, about the nanny state and about the big brother watching you. Now, the question here is that security is the thin end of the wedge. And very often, see, most states, and this could be a default position, even with democracies, even Donald Trump's democracy, even Boris Johnson won't mind a more intrusive state if it suits his purposes. So the Europeans are more sensitive to their freedoms than even the Americans are. The fact is that today, and again, it's a question of generation, that in a high-tech age, you will find that surveillance, the government say it's a necessary evil. It is an evil in its own way, but technology is going to reduce our freedoms even more. We already, anyone can, not just any government, any hacker will probably know what you're doing all the time. The days of anonymity are rapidly disappearing. Your habits, the websites you visit, whether you have a chip on your phone that can track every movement of yours, a time will come when even without interfering with your phone, you will be tracked. So therefore, this is a part of Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, that democracy would, I believe, be to a degree adversely affected by technology. This is something which democracies have to think about very carefully. But the fact is that intrusiveness is going to increase and not decrease. So what happens is that if you want to bring dissenters into line with the CBI or the ED or whatever, these are old tricks that Indian governments have played. And it's a natural tendency for them to seek more power. So certainly, that's something there. And in fact, we have Jenna's question about, we'll come to that later, but we'll make a note of that because I'd like to respond to the socialist term. But your short point about Hong Kong. You see, Hong Kong, after the Treaty of Nanjing in 1842, I mean, this was after the end of the Opium War, and you had a number of treaties after. The Boxer Revolt compounded this. The fact was that towards the end of the 19th century, you had, in fact, you had Europeans controlling a number of ports in China, Western China, including Shanghai and Tsingtao or Jingdao, which was a German possession, that you had all of these issues coming up. The fact was that Hong Kong was given on a lease, that lease expired, and the Chinese said that we'll have one country, two systems. That continued, but gradually they felt that Hong Kong was getting out of control. So they came in and they walked in and they put an end to the incipient democracy. I was in Hong Kong when the takeover was about to take place, was going to be handed over. That time Chris Patton was the governor. I went a year later, in fact 2 years later, when Tung Chee-hwa had taken over and Anson Chan was thrown out. He was the cabinet secretary, and Donald Tsang, who I'd met earlier, he was the chief at that time, the number 2 to Tung Chee-hwa. But now, at the moment, obviously the present administrator takes her orders from Beijing, and they've virtually taken over. And because of the somewhat clumsy handling of COVID by the People's Republic of China, it has affected Hong Kong as well. So you have a number of hospitalizations. All the people who believed in independent, Hong Kong have been silenced. Some have been put behind bars. Others are barred from speaking again. So the state, the empire hits back has obviously applied over there. So I'll respond to other questions now, because any other issue I'll raise will probably be covered in the question answer session.
Sure, sir. Sure, sir.
Sure, sir.
That
Please.
is
let's hear the others, if anything, or any written question, I'd respond to that.
Yes, sir. There is a
Yes,
question
sir.
from Amalan Mishra. He's asking when there is a conflict between implementing a law and interest of the marginalized people, how should one go about it? Example is Citizenship Amendment Act.
Sure.
Highlight upon.
See, what happens is that very often the marginalized communities don't really have a spokesman, as it were. And of course, one extreme example is that of Naxalites, let's say, or Naxalism, left-wing extremism. Now, what happened in fact in a state like Chhattisgarh, when the Naxalites first came, we could say that the Naxalites were honest and we were corrupt. After the Naxalites had settled in, after a few years, on account of fear, we became honest and the Naxalites became corrupt. So, hello, am I audible? Sorry.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. So what happened was that the marginalized people, unless, you see, in a political, they have to obviously get together. And this is where the Marxian vision has relevance, that you say that, workers of the world unite. If they get together, they can become a powerful group, their voices will be heard. The best part of a democracy is the government will respond. Everyone says that we are pro-SC, we are pro-ST, we are pro-poor, and the governments have to some extent walk the talk. If we look at the reduction of absolute poverty, there I think all governments have done their bit. They've tried to do it. Maybe it makes good politics for them. But we need to give credit to all the governments for at least making inroads into poverty. I tell the youngsters and the millennials that I would not live to see the day when policy is abolished in this country, but you will. And that will happen. So, but marginalized sections, one is policy is supposed to target them. Now, in reality, very often, the implementing agencies may not be that sympathetic to the customer. And there has to be a political will. But the bureaucracy is only an instrument. And therefore, a wise government uses the bureaucracy. No bureaucrat can ever be a substitute for a politician. And politicians, in many ways, are smarter than we are. We pass one difficult exam. They pass a more difficult exam every 5 years. And they have their feet planted more firmly on the ground. And they are sometimes tend to be less petty than us.
Yes, sir.
Chinese aggressive South Sea China conflict. Well, this is Jagan's. I'll respond according to what you suggest, Madhavi. We'll
Yes,
take
sir,
it
please,
one by one,
sir.
whatever you say.
Sir, if you have any part of your lecture.
No, you see, what I've done is I've flagged most of the key issues.
Yes, sir,
the others will, of course, come. I'll talk briefly about Indian racism and about culture. And one is ethnically, we don't know who we are. India, see, the disadvantage we have as a culture is that even though we are an ancient civilization, we've not been able to document this. The ICV, or the Indus Valley Civilization, basically that because the script has not been deciphered, we are not sure about what really happened. What we do know is that it was contemporaneous with the Old Kingdom, and I'm talking about the early Bronze Age. It was contemporaneous with the old Kingdom of Egypt and the kingdoms of Sumer and Akkad in Mesopotamia. Now, Sumerian and Akkadian artifacts have been found in IVC sites in Dholavira as well. But our artifacts have not been found over. There was trade, that there's no doubt about. That ships were moving, and these two early Bronze Age civilizations exchanged goods, and maybe people had moved around. They would have had a lingua franca. But the fact is that these were, this has not been documented by us. Historically, as we know, hieroglyphics were deciphered in the 19th century, and so was cuneiform. Now, when we talk about Sanskrit being one of the old Indo-European languages, as it were, it is one. But our oldest extant Indian languages are two, basically, Brahmi and Tamil. And the Tamil of the Sangam age is one of the oldest languages, probably the oldest along with Brahmi. And very often the two languages are hyphenated. But the fact was that even in the times of the oldest kingdoms of India, historically, the Magad kingdom in Bihar and the Pandyas, in fact, the Pandyas in southern Tamil Nadu, these are the two oldest kingdoms that we have. But whatever records we have are those which pertain to the 3rd century BC. Sorry, Dr. Veeramani had raised his hand. So, Madhavi, should I respond to Dr. Veeramani? Or? Yeah.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Sorry, Dr. Veeramani.
Sir, actually, you can finish this the present question, and then we can move on in an order.
Okay.
Like we are having a list of questions in the chat.
Sure. Okay. Now the thing is that therefore, you see, Indian history is largely written by non-Indians. And there were reasons for this. One can argue that maybe if in the ancient Hindu belief, space and time were relative. The idea, therefore, unlike in other civilizations, everything was documented. Ours was a very powerful oral tradition. And because our first script was not deciphered, we were latecomers in the world of languages. All the other civilizations, the Indians, in India and probably the Olmecs of Mesoamerica, their languages have not been deciphered. And these are basically Bronze Age civilizations. Every other Bronze Age language has been deciphered, whether it's the hieroglyphs, whether it's cuneiform, whether it is the Aramaic script, all of these have been. And we have this huge disadvantage of not having a decipherable language. Our first Sanskrit texts are available only around the time of Christ and afterwards. So we were latecomers in the written word.
Sir, can we go to the next question, sir?
Sure.
Sir, then let us answer the Gina's question regarding the word socialist in the preamble. So what is the relevance of it in the present day? Should we continue with it?
You see, socialism means different things to different people. Now, in one sense that if you're looking at a kind of Marxian model about ownership of the means of production, this may not perhaps be totally workable. But then you can have, for example, if you take diffused ownership of a company, that could also be a form of socialism. When you look at a lot of private companies which are owned, right now Elon Musk wants to take over Twitter. But the fact is that, Twitter is owned by a number of people. Twitter can say that ours is a socialist thing because we're owned by many people. So therefore, you're looking at different. But I would say that even socialist, if you call Keynesian economic socialist, yes, it's very relevant today. So therefore, socialism is as much of something which is indicative rather than the literal form of socialism. So it sounds good, and the principles remain valid today. Now, it depends on how you interpret the word socialism.
Sure, sir. It depends on the particular interpretation. So the next question will go with the Jagan's question regarding how we can handle the aggressive China in the South China Sea. At one side, now we are part of US Quad. On the other side, we are also taking a stance of not criticizing Russia. So at this point of time, how we can take forward this Quad and this Russia thing and the issue of South China?
Sure. Oh, sure. I just one second. As far as the South China Sea is concerned, this is something the People Republic of China regard this as their backyard. And we have what is called creeping aggression or creeping expansionism. During my visit to Southeast Asia, I did meet a lot of our colleagues from Indonesia, the Philippines, Malaysia, Singapore, and they said they had one thing in common. They said, well, what are you Indians doing? Don't you realize that China today is like Imperial Japan in the 1930s? A country unscrupulous, anxious for resources, willing to obtain them by any means. And their behavior is reminiscent of Japanese, right from the invasion of Manchuria and Korea in 1931 onwards. The kind of creeping acquisition, because like Japan, China is hungry for resources, and they will stop at nothing to get them. So to that extent, it creates a kind of deja vu, as it were. Now the question is the South China Sea. You have a number of islands, you have the Paracel Islands, you have a lot of atolls which are not occupied. Now, historically, if you look at your international law, you're aware of what is your maritime boundary and your economic zone, as it were. But there's a degree of ambiguity over here. So many countries, when they do explore the oceans, they would like to go as far as they can in exploiting these resources. Now, in these islands, which are largely uninhabited, since no one else was walking in, the Vietnamese had claimed some of these islands, Spratly Islands, so did the Philippines, so did China. But China had the clout to walk in and sit out there, taking, if you like, the first mover's advantage. So they went and parked themselves over there, relying on the fact that possession is 9 points of the law. So they sat there. And given half a chance, they would sit on a number of other places also. And it's like adverse possession. So this, you could call it creeping encroachment, you could call it whatever you want to. But the fact is that its might is right. And therefore, the US are getting pretty active. Therefore, the court has come. The court is probably necessary. And they need to gang up to keep a check on this, because Chinese hegemonism and obviously expansionism is one of the major threats to world security. And as far as the Quad is concerned, and we link this up with Russia and Ukraine, if you like. Let's face it. If China were to invade India today and say we would like to liberate South Tibet, which means Arunachal Pradesh, we would probably end up literally fighting on our own. We'll get support, we'll get weapons, but in the ultimate analysis, no one is going to come to our rescue. Unless you enter into a kind of NATO-like agreement where they're committed to that, you're not secure. Whether you want to end something is a matter for our public policy to decide. We would like to be independent. We would like to walk a tightrope, which we are doing in Ukraine right now. And as far as Russia is concerned, with the invasion of Ukraine, it has put us in an awkward position. It has put the Chinese in an awkward position, because they need the West, as you know, probably better than I do, that the Chinese and the US economies are linked at the hip, almost like Siamese twins, with Chinese ownership of US bonds, and that they're trying to disengage right now. But the fact is that the Chinese need the West right now. They're not fully geared up to go on their own, as it were. And the Soviet Union is becoming almost the danger of becoming the B team of the Chinese. Now that fear does, because we are dependent on Soviet hardware, apart from Soviet goodwill in some cases. But the fact is that our basic nightmare, our greatest threat in the long term is China. And therefore, we also have to walk our own tightrope. I believe that the MEA are walking this tightrope right now as best as they can. They haven't toppled over yet, and I don't think they will.
Thank you, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, sir. One question, sir. When we are getting very less benefit from this FTA and many agreements on economic basis with other countries. So how can we
on free trade agreements, is it?
Free trade agreement.
Yes, sir. Free trade agreement.
On bilateral trade agreements.
Yes, sir.
See, the question is that over the years, what we have had is bilateral discussions with other countries, a number of discussions. I've been on a few of these delegations, where we meet our partner country and we thrash out certain trade issues. So this has been done. And government to government discussion. Now, ideally, the WTO, in a sense, the concept is very good. It has worked well in its own way, because people are forced to play by the rules. But the fact is that many countries don't play by the rules. The Japanese, in agriculture, the biggest culprits are the Japanese, followed by the European Union. We ourselves are protectionist. And therefore, what happens is the WTO, by and large, tries to keep us honest. Ideally, there must be a multilateral agency. But countries have been tempted to go on their own. Now, if countries are deviating, we have probably no choice but to deviate ourselves, and especially when we walked out of the Asia-Pacific trade bloc, which I believe we should never have been walked, although we were losing in that. But that was a rather drastic step. So now we have no choice but to engage bilaterally. The Australian agreement may have got us fairly good terms. And of course, our dairy sector has been protected, unfortunately for the Indian consumer, but still, it was probably necessary. So similarly, when Boris Johnson comes here in the near future, we would be doing a lot of business with him, because post-Brexit, which I believe was a mistake for them, they're doing a damage repair exercise right now. So it may be an interesting agreement. So in a sense, bilateral agreements are a result of the weaknesses of the multilateral system, which really, it's an ideal system, the multilateral system, but we have to make the best of a bad job.
Thank you, sir. Sir, two questions on public policy, sir. What is the basic parameters that we have to consider when asked in a panel in the interview that write a public policy on waste management or write a public policy on water resource development like this? Okay. And another question is, what area we should focus on public policy in the current times?
Sorry, what I'll do is I'll just take up some of your points one by one. Now, okay. You talked about waste management, right?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Now, you see, waste management is something which we have a cultural overhang. Let us say that if I am an Orthodox Indian, say, say for example, a good Hindu. Now, what I will do is I will keep my puja place very clean. That would be very clean. Then I would, as part of my cultural upbringing, I will keep my bedroom and maybe the room I meet my visitors very clean. My bathroom will be a little away, and I'll clean my bathroom only by throwing buckets of water. And then when it comes to my garbage, I would normally throw it onto the street, because for us, it's like a system of umbra and penumbra, that we as a culture seem to lack civic sense, because public goods are not our goods. There's no connect between us and the overall welfare of a community. Our precursors in the IVC or the Indus Valley were much more civilized than we were. So civic sense has become, a kind of alien concept. If you look at independent India, if you look at the colonial government invested a lot of money in sewage systems in Indian cities. Post-colonial times, I was reviewing some of the cities that I've worked in, and I found that things had not changed since the British left. Because when you're fighting a municipal election, you can't say, I'm going to improve the sewage system. They will say, Bijli, Pani, give us water, give us proper pathways. But no one says, please improve the sewage system. So it lacks a political constituency. So any public policy paper would probably say, how do you build up public opinion in favor of sewage control? And that's where Swachh Bharat is a good thing, because it creates awareness that we need to maintain cleanliness, not only in our own households, but in the community. So any public policy paper would have to give a reason. Because how is public policy decided? Interest groups agree with each other. They are vested interests. They meet. They put pressure in parliament. The best part about the Indian parliament is that while what you see is parliamentarians shouting, but you forget the good part of parliament, which is the parliamentary committees. Their political opponents sit together, discuss issues very rationally, and invariably they do arrive at decent conclusions. So, that's why any policy paper will have to go to the parliamentary committee, get clearance of the cabinet. It can be done. And about water management, now there's an increase, a stronger constituency of water conservation. It's important even in the northern Indo-Gangetic plains, but mainly in peninsular India. In Madhya Pradesh, a lot of our water, like in most of the peninsular states, the runoff is a huge thing. We lose a lot of water. Therefore, water conservation becomes critical at all levels. It will raise your groundwater levels in any case. And you need that. Unless we learn to conserve water, things are not going. Now, governments are taking steps, sporadic steps, in order to improve our water management. And that also means that a lot of areas, we need to avoid paddy cultivation and sugarcane cultivation, which continues because of our dubious policies. If we subsidize paddy, what happens is we're encouraging bad agriculture practices in Punjab and Haryana. And for sugarcane as well, I would say that, apart from maybe parts of the Krishna Valley and the Godavari Valley in the and the Kaveri Delta, but apart from that, and the districts on the northern back of the Ganges, apart from that, you shouldn't be growing sugarcane at all. And just adjust my one second. Sorry.
Sir, can we go with the next question, sir?
Sure.
Sir, there is a question from Sachin Kumar. It is regarding how has Indian civil services fared in the last 75 years? Is it time to overhaul it as completely? As an young civil servant, what reforms one should try to bring in short term and long term? So it is general about the performance of civil services in the last 75 years and how to take it forward.
Okay. You see, we were the successors of the British precursors. Now, while the colonial government they did such an manage their own affairs as best as they could, and certainly in the interests of the colonies. Now, if you've seen the constitutional debates, the consensus was that we would continue with these services to ensure a fairly smooth transition. So in a sense, the civil service had to manage this transition. Now, one thing is very clear, that the civil service is only an agency. Our job is not to be masters, but we are servants. Now, whose servants are we? This is a key question. We say that we are responsible to the Constitution. Now, we are independent. The Constitution gives us a lot of independence. And yet, we have to follow the policies of the political executive, which is how it should be in a democracy. So, our political executive, they did give us a democratic framework. They worked towards reform in the early first 3-5-year plans. They built up infrastructure, the temples of modern India. Education was supported in the first 5-year plan, but gradually it lost its constituency. As far as local government is concerned, there was no political will. And the fact is that if the politicians don't want to share power, even bureaucrats, given a choice, would not like to share power either with powerful block panchayats and zilla panchayats. They prefer the autonomy. So there is, in fact, an unspoken agreement between politicians and IAS officers also, that both criticize each other, but both probably feed on each other. The politician likes the IAS officer because, number one, he is scared of an organized department. And the IAS officer is dispensable, he can be sent anywhere. So the result is that his own threat perception is reduced. So therefore, to that extent, he doesn't have a threat perception vis-a-vis the IAS as much as he has with the IPS, because he may misuse the IPS, but the ICS chap might be in the CBI the next day or something else, and the law will catch up with him. So to that extent, it is a working relationship. Secondly, politicians, especially in the central government, have a comfort level with the IAS officers because they have worked in the field. So to that extent, the system continues. Is the IAS an anachronism? To a degree, yes. But the fact is that it survives because local government does not really exist as the way it should, except in Kerala, in this country. So to that extent, you see, in other countries, what has happened is, in the developed world, is different, because in Europe, local government grew organically since the Middle Ages. They grew through guilds and towns. So you had town administration before you had a central government. In our case, you had feudal structures, but you had nothing, no base to build on. So therefore, to that extent, the civil service was a kind of superimposition in colonial times and continues to this day. But as long as it suits the government of the day, they will keep it. If you talk about lateral recruitment, there's nothing wrong with that. You talk about recruitment of the IAS and the IPS, there is a cadre gap. You may need to fill these posts. At the same time, you have to maintain, people say maintaining quality, that matter is open to debate. But in terms of cadre management, instead of a pyramid, if you create a gopuram, then your organization would suffer.
Thank you, sir. So one question about the labor policy is that, are we moving?
Labor policy.
One question about labor policy is that, are we moving away from a socialistic perspective to a capitalistic perspective? Yeah, and we are disempowering the labor.
The answer is probably yes and no. As far as the Industrial Disputes Act is concerned, that had actually, it was a socialist measure, but the fact was that the trade unions were getting too powerful, and these restrictions adversely impacted production. So therefore, labor reforms were necessary, because they said that what you have in this country is a labor aristocracy, like you have a farmer aristocracy. So they would literally hold the country to ransom in many ways. Britain was the sick man of Europe. It remained the sick man of Europe till Margaret Thatcher put an end to the coal mining agitation led by Arthur Scargill. And after that, Britain's growth rates improved. That was it. So now what happens is that a lot of these labor reforms, like the Industrial Disputes Act, at the same time, the socialist aspect of the welfare of the labor, we've had more laws. Therefore, the labor laws proposed by the present government address the issue in two ways. They are increasing the welfare aspect, as it is, for example, the Provident Fund management is largely of the highest interest rates in your Provident Fund. So the idea is take care of them this way. Then compensation for injuries, housing, these are welfare measures. But the power of the trade unions may have to be broken. What happened after independence was, I won't name the steel plant, but a lot of trade union leaders accidentally fell into furnaces. So what happens is that, those methods were resorted to.
Sir, can we go to the next question, sir?
Sure.
Sir, the next question is by Mr. Ashutosh Yadav, which is regarding the freebies. So how we have to handle this freebies? The freebies schemes
oh,
or
yeah,
the
You see,
how we have to
sure, yeah.
balance the populism and the social welfare point of view.
You see, what happened was that recently you may have read in the papers about someone who approached the Supreme Court saying that these freebies are bad. Now, the fact is that we live in a free world. Now, what if I'm a politician and I say that, look, if you vote for me, then I'll give you all free food. Now, what happens is that when I say this, I may lose a bit of credibility. So if you want to punish me for making silly promises, you throw me out. The Supreme Court will not throw me out, but you, the voter, will, because I've made promises I can't fulfill. So this is a case of caveat emptor, that let the voter decide as to whether this fellow is. Now, if you take, for example, in Delhi, you take Arvind Kejriwal's. Now, Arvind Kejriwal, apart from he has certain virtues and a good job in health and education, but he's going to give you free power. Now, who pays for free power? You see, ultimately what happens is that the bigger consumers, they are being cross-subsidized. So like my power bills, for example, because I've got an air conditioner in front behind me. So what happens is our bills have been going up steadily, much higher. So we are subsidizing the Delhi government's free power. Because now, if it's a cross-subsidy, then the question is it a cross-subsidy that the market can bear? Let us take the case of technical education, even a state like Karnataka, which is in the forefront of technical education. Suppose government has no space in its engineering colleges or medical colleges. Then what do? A parent would say, okay, I can't get into government. If I have lots of money, I'll send my child abroad. Or if I have enough money, I'll go to Manipal or wherever. Now, what I do is I pay a certain amount of money to Manipal. If I can't go to Manipal, then I might go to DY college in Karad or whatever, and then I pay a smaller amount. Or if I want to go to the Baswan Engineering College or the Adel Engineering College, then I pay a much smaller amount in any case. So it is what the market can bear. So what happens is that it's largely market oriented. And because government is not, you take the case of students in Ukraine. Now, what happens in medical colleges is cheaper for them to go to Ukraine. And now you have to bail out these kids in one way or the other. I believe, I'm optimistic, I believe that Ukraine will take them back and this war would end in a month or so. And it will take time to repair the damage, but a lot of them may go back. There'll be a huge package to rehabilitate Ukraine after this war. Whether the Soviet Union keeps, Donetsk and Luhansk is a different matter, or try and create a corridor along the northern coast of the Black Sea from Mariupol to Crimea. But the short point is that, as far as freebies are concerned, yes, in Tamil Nadu, you get a television set. And if someone else promises you something, you take that and take it as it comes. But ultimately, they have to balance their books. So the court's view is that the politicians are grown-up people. They should realize what they can afford and what they can't. And if they do give up, the voter will punish them.
So the follow-up question with regarding the same will be, what would be the right way for the identification of beneficiaries for the poverty alleviation programs? So this has been a huge challenge for us for the past 75 years, and we have tried a lot of measures, including the socio-economic caste system. So what is the right policy making for identification?
I think that Aadhaar card, with all its faults, is not perfect, but it has certainly helped. And the present government, I think, deserves credit for better targeting. You have a BPL list. Now, in a BPL list, find people who've been dead for 10 years on the BPL list. And obviously the substitutes come. But the fact is that, as the courts have all said, that the best disinfectant is sunlight. And therefore, the list of your beneficiaries should be in the public domain. There's a need. The RTI Act has certainly helped as a reform measure. Put everything in the public and let people see. Hang out the list of people who are beneficiaries, and people will come and say, why is this fellow there? In that list, he died 10 years ago, or he doesn't live over here. So ultimately, there are ways of filtering non-deserving people, and I think the systems are improving.
So Aadhaar will be a right way of identifying the beneficiaries.
See, Aadhaar is one way. It's not perfect, but I sympathize with the government on this because Aadhaar, you need a database in any case. Whether you have an intrusive state or not, there's a degree of inevitability almost. So to that extent, it's difficult, but Aadhaar at least has performed a certain purpose for which I think it should be carried to its logical conclusion as far as BPL programs are concerned. And then you have to update BPL lists, but above all, put them all in the public domain. Earlier on, you would put a thumb impression. People would put their thumb and even they put their toes as well onto that paper with a kind of print. But that stuff now is gradually being reduced.
Fine, sir. Fine.
Welcome. Yes, Madhu.
Sir, I think so. Madhavi, yeah, Madhavi ma'am.
Sir, can you hear me, sir?
Yeah, loud and clear, Madhu.
Yes.
Yes, sir. Sir, almost we have clarified all the doubts, sir. Please give your thoughts about the public policy and certain interview techniques, and we will find out.
Well, you see, as far as public policy is concerned, ultimately, it is what public policy is a result of certain inputs, whether of interest groups, whether of people who have a problem, but how they articulate this. The US system is pretty rational because you have lobbies over there. Now, these lobbies, what happens is that there is a kind of code of conduct. You have policy capture. Now, policy capture means if a powerful vested interest group captures policy, like, for example, your agriculture policies. Now, your rich farmer, your farm aristocracy, they virtually captured your policy. Today, TRS can say that I'm going to ensure that people procure paddy, and if you, I will procure it. Now, what happens is Punjab and Haryana have been blackmailing the government of India for years, especially Punjab, because if you don't buy their paddy, then they say we play the secessionist card. Even Chandrababu Naidu used to blackmail the government of India as well. Basically, the kind of pressure that you can put. So public policy is about, about how pressure groups operate. And for every one pressure group, there is a counter group as well. So governments, it is in their interest to enlarge the debate, bring in more participants. So the powerful lobby is to a certain neutralized by other lobbies as well. It becomes a battle of lobby. Classic example is the jute order. People say that you should pack your sugar in jute bags and your food grains in jute bags. Then you had the polyethylene, polypropylene lobby, which said our bags are better, they're waterproof. So then they said, if you don't do this, our jute farmers will starve and our jute industry will collapse. So it's a combination of economic and non-economic issues as well. And the conflict between economics and politics is endless, and that will continue. And, obviously there has to be a compromise somewhere. As far as the interview is concerned, the point I made at the outset was that one is knowledge is power, and therefore you need to know what you're talking about. Never pretend to know more than you do. And if you're not sure, please say so. And above all, do not be ethnically, I think it's in our blood, that we tend to opinions. We have an opinion on every subject under the sun. But I would say keep your opinion yourself, and your inputs should be based on facts. Sorry, I'll just check. My internet is not very clear. Just 1 second. Is it okay now? Am
Yes,
I
sir,
audible?
fine, sir.
Okay.
Yeah, you're audible.
Okay, that's fine. Okay. So then the thing is that, and above all, maintain eye-to-eye contact with the interviewer. Try and understand the question before you rush into the answer. And don't be definitive. You don't, and we can learn from the Americans this way. They're not very definitive. They say, I feel it could be this for these reasons. But don't say it is for these reasons. And because we live in a fairly uncertain world, we just say that this seems to be the case, and this is what this is behind my suggestion or my point of view. And then don't get involved, because quite often interviewers can be quite clumsy themselves, and they get excited, and that's an occupational hazard as an interviewee. So you have to deal with such characters as well. So you maintain your equanimity, be alert, be sympathetic, and look at the body language as well, because you're on to. But remember, make or break affair. And then not all interviewers are, opinionated. Some are, you can't help that. But by and large, they'll also try and catch you off guard if you're shooting a line or if you're too definite. I remember someone talking about how, first the Nehru Gandhi family should rule. And so I asked a question. I said that I'm actually a worshipper of this family, and I believe they are God's gift to the nation, and they should be made hereditary monarchs. Would you agree with me? If so, why? And if you don't agree, why not? So this was an unexpected question. Of course, the guy was able to think his way through and gave a reasonable answer at the end of the day. But you have to be prepared for that stuff.
Fine, sir. Sir, final thoughts, sir, regarding the, this will be the classic question everywhere you will be asked regarding the recommendation which you gave with respect to the civil services examination, which all of the students are aspiring for, regarding the age or optionals, the committee recommendations.
The recommendations are in different parts. What we put in the public domain was that the age limit needs to be brought down for a variety of reasons. For the general candidates, it was 32. Earlier, it was 22 many years ago. So the ultimate consensus, we as a committee recommended that the age should be reduced, but every previous committee had said the same thing, and their reports were thrown in the dustbin. So we said that we don't want our report to be thrown in the dustbin. Let us carefully consider, we have to protect our politicians also, because they will surrender the moment such a recommendation comes. And to use a Hindi phrase, we said, "Jor ka dhakka dheere se lagi," and therefore let the blow be softened. So we said, do not make any change in the age limit for 2 years. In the third year, it should become 31. In the fourth year, 30, fifth year, 29, sixth year, 28, seventh year, 27, eighth year, 20. We went down to 24. The UPSC and the government overruled us. They said, no, we can make it 26. But they will accept this formula of no, give people time. Because put yourself in the student's shoes. Overnight, you can't change your policy. A person has aspirations. And therefore, you have to allow people a chance to adjust to a new format. That's one reason why the previous recommendations were thrown out. So the thing must be incremental. Along with that, we said, no limit on the number of attempts. Since we're not giving you long, have as many attempts as you like, it doesn't matter. So that was one of the main recommendations which we put in the public domain. We have other recommendations which we have not put in the public domain. And when the pressmen ask me about it, I say I can neither confirm nor deny such reports.
Fine, sir. Fine, sir. So it's almost 8 now, sir. So we'll thank you for spending the time with us with respect to public policy and discussing and answering our questions which we posted, sir. Thanks a lot. So thanks for joining. On behalf of Kingmakers IAS Academy, I would like to thank wholeheartedly, and I will also extend my request that in future also we need your support, and we need sessions by you to our students who are attending the basic classes and for the personality test, sir. So we hope that you will be continuing your lecture with our institute, sir. Thank you, sir. Thanks for joining. On behalf of the institute, I would like to extend it.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Adar. Thank you, Madhavi. Thank you, Professor Bhuminathan. Thank you, Mr. Radhashekhar. All of you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you very much. And